Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In this video today, we're going to be discussing some recent developments with respect to immigration reform or proposed immigration reform by the Trump administration and by congressional leaders back in the United States. A recent Reuters article caught my eye. The title is "Trump Promises to Take the Heat for Broad Immigration Deal," published January 9th, 2018, again as Reuters, and I found this on Reuters.com. Washington. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday he was ready to accept an onslaught of criticism if lawmakers tackle broad immigration reforms after an initial deal to help the young illegal immigrants known as Dreamers and build a wall on the U.S. border with Mexico. Continuing quite a ways further down in this article, quoting further, but after the meeting, lawmakers from both parties said they would meet as early as Wednesday to continue negotiations on a deal covering DACA and border security, as well as a visa lottery program and chain migration, which could address the status of relatives of Dreamers who are still in the United States illegally. Quoting further from Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, "We're certainly open to talking about a number of other issues when it comes to immigration, but right now this administration is focused on those four things and that negotiation and not a lot else at this front." Okay, so I've skipped a lot with respect to this article, and I strongly recommend any viewer go ahead and check out this article on Reuters because it's fairly detailed. But I want to kind of do a synopsis for purposes of sort of getting to the crux of possible immigration reform, especially possible reforms that could have significant impacts on folks who are out here in Southeast Asia and the kind of visas we generally tend to see out here in Southeast Asia. So first of all, DACA, or the DACA, that has to do with children who immigrated to the United States, not really at their own behest. They were sort of brought in by parents or other relatives into the U.S. when they were underage and unable to form intent on their own. These folks have been, I would say, championed by certain factions, and it's kind of hard, I think, on a political level to really say, yeah, just kick those folks out. Yeah, someone who's been in the United States since they were 4 years old, and now they're 21, and they've never known any place else. Yeah, it seems a little inequitable to just kick those folks out. So it seems that this issue of the DACA is going to be sort of a preface to a later and more detailed negotiation with respect to immigration on the whole. Trump appears to be amenable to making concessions with respect to the so-called Dreamers, but those concessions seem to be connected to a later phase in this process. So there's the Dreamers issue, then there's these other four issues, and then there's further issues at an even deeper level with respect to comprehensive immigration reform. I'm not going to get to that third phase. That seems to be dealing with, some almost systemic aspects of U.S. immigration, but of particular note, these seem to be priorities of the administration, is you've got DACA, okay, which they understand that there are people who are pretty adamant about DACA, so they've got to deal with this from a negotiating standpoint. And then they go on to mention border security. We all remember Trump made campaign promises with respect to walls and border security along the southern U.S. border, so obviously that seems to be a priority, as well as a visa lottery program. This has been an interesting one. The visa lottery is an interesting mechanism. It basically is a lottery that allows a certain number of people each year to just be granted immigrant status or be granted an immigrant visa number and allowed to apply for an immigrant visa simply based on their nationality. And the thinking goes, they're trying to, it's a diversity visa lottery. They're trying to improve diversity in the United States, and it was invented basically to sort of single out countries that didn't have a heavy presence of their nationals in the United States to allow them access to the United States for no other reason than diversity. That's actually what the visa program is called, the diversity visa lottery. And I've heard varying complaints and various proponents of the diversity visa lottery. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on it, quite frankly. I can see the benefits to it. I can also see, the arguments of the opponents of it. That being said, I have to think that if any type of comprehensive immigration reform comes down the pike, I gotta think that this visa lottery is probably one of the first things to go. How it got in is kind of an interesting story, and I'm not going to go into that, how it got enacted, and then the fact that it's sort of hung on through all the trials and tribulations of sort of American lawmaking is kind of fascinating, and something of a tribute to the American legislative process and the American mindset. But that being said, I just don't see that that's going to survive a real serious look at immigration reform. That being said, this is of more interest to me because this is an interesting one. They keep mentioning so-called chain migration. And what we're talking about here is, it is rather curious because the Immigration Nationality Act, which was enacted at the middle of the last century, was designed at a very different time in American history. It just simply, I won't call it an anachronism, although there are aspects of it which I would say are somewhat throwbacks, but it just doesn't accurately reflect the current time, I would say. Basically, what it was set up for, it was very, how do I put it? It was very positive toward family migration in the United States. There remains a category for brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens. So children of U.S. citizens, parents of U.S. citizens, brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens, unmarried children, married children. There's, and of varying ages, there's many different categories within the family visa context that create this so-called chain migration, which many people that are watching this video may have heard of so-called anchor babies. You get, a child who's born in the United States, that can create the possibility of a later immigration benefit for that child's parents, a later immigration benefit for that child's, currently as the law sits, for that child's siblings, and later for that child's children, unmarried or married, and that child's spouses and fiancés of that child, or that person at that point, I guess I should say. It seems that the Trump administration is pretty serious about truncating these options as far as the visa benefits that sort of flow from citizenship in the United States or permanent residence in the United States. That's another thing to keep in mind. So-called chain migrants can be attached to a permanent resident of the U.S. Children of permanent residents, spouses of permanent residents, they are able to petition for certain benefits under the current regime. So the thing to take away from this video that I would want the viewers to sort of understand where I'm coming from, and the folks that are out here in Southeast Asia, when they're talking about chain migration, that is going to significantly change, substantially change for that matter, the sort of environment with respect to immigration moving forward. If so-called chain migration is significantly truncated, we could be looking at a massively different system, comparing today to that system in the future. Again, it remains to be seen what that system is going to look like, but it seems like this administration is pretty serious about at least altering the so-called environment for so-called chain migration.